We're going to start digging into each archetype one by one, starting with the hero. But before we get into the hero, we need to place it, because archetypes, as we know, don't live in a vacuum on their own. They live inside a quadrant, and the quadrant is the motivational engine underneath everything. The hero belongs in the change the world quadrant. And the change the world quadrant does exactly what the name says. It powers brands that refuse to accept the world as it is. These are brands driven by ambition, challenge, disruption, and impact. They don't polish the status quo, they challenge it. The quadrant is fueled by the belief that progress requires friction, that improvement begins with courage, and that transformation is always available to those willing to move toward difficulty rather than away from it. Here are the three archetypes inside the quadrant: the hero, the magician, and the rebel. They all seek change, but each one uses a different psychological method to get there. The magician transforms through insight and revelation. The rebel challenges through defiance and disruption. The hero, and this is the one we're cracking open today, confronts adversity through capability and discipline. So if the quadrant tells us the direction of a brand's motivation, the archetype tells us the method. And the hero's method is earned strength. So let's talk about the hero's motivations. Now, here is where most people get this wrong. I mean, most brands, most marketers, and most strategists. People love to call their brands a hero brand. It sounds bold. It sounds confident. It sounds powerful. The problem is that most brands claiming the hero archetype are not heroic at all. They're motivational at best, self-congratulatory at worst. They talk about winning, about greatness, about inspiration, but they skip the essential part of the hero's story: the struggle, confrontation, the growth, the work. The hero archetype is not rooted in confidence. It's rooted in capability that is earned. And that distinction is really important. Carl Jung identified the hero as part of the psyche that confronts adversity in order to transform. Not transform circumstances, transform the self. It is an internal process. That's why humans respond so strongly to hero stories, because they mirror the battles we all experience within ourselves. Joseph Campbell mapped it further. The hero receives a call. They resist it, they enter the unknown world, they face trials, they receive guidance, they experience a kind of symbolic death, and then they return changed. That's not a narrative formula, or at least only a narrative. That's a psychological developmental arc. Brands that use the hero archetype correctly are tapping into that arc. So what drives hero archetypes psychologically? What is the motivational core? It's this: humans, all of us, want to feel capable. That's it. That's the engine. Albert Bandura's research on self-efficacy showed that belief in your own capability is a stronger predictor of action rather than actual capability. The hero archetype works because it raises that. It shows people that they can do something difficult. It demonstrates that capability is possible, that it's available, that it's earned through effort, not just handed down. Hero brands are motivated by a defined opponent, not a person necessarily. It can be a mindset, a limitation, a standard, or a threat. My friend Laura Reese digs into this in her new book as well, which is Strategic Enemy. I encourage you to pick it up. Nike's opponent is doubt. Microsoft's opponent is limitation. And the Sea Shepherd's opponent is environmental destruction. The specific form of the opponent doesn't really matter as much as the psychological need for one. The hero archetype requires resistance. Without resistance, there's nothing to overcome. And critically, the hero wants to strengthen the patron, not overshadow them, not rescue them, strengthen them. This is where the hero separates from the sovereign or the rebel. The sovereign wants to lead. The rebel wants to disrupt. The hero wants to empower. Hero brands operate as guides, coaches, trainers, mentors, allies. Their goal is not to display their own strength. Their goal is to help the patron find theirs. That single distinction, elevating the patron rather than glorifying the brand, is the difference between a real hero brand and a performance of heroism. Let's talk about what the hero archetype delivers when it's done right. These are the genuine strengths of a hero brand, and these absolutely influence a brand's purpose. First is courage. Hero brands are defined by their willingness to confront what others avoid. Their courage isn't performative and it isn't reckless. It's the discipline to move forward towards a challenge with clarity and conviction, even when the path is uncertain. Patrons trust brands that act decisively, especially in categories weighed down by indecision, complacency, or bureaucracy. The hero steps into the tension and shows what momentum looks like. And that courage shapes internal culture too. Teams inside of hero brands understand that bold action is expected rather than feared. That creates forward motion that compounds over time. The next trait is resilience. Hero brands don't crumble under pressure. They demonstrate that hardship is survivable, and then they survive it. That demonstration builds massive trust. When a brand shows that it can operate through difficulty with adaptability and emotional discipline, the patron feels it. Resilience becomes a form of quiet reassurance. The hero proves its strength not by avoiding hardship, but by moving through hardship with intention. Inspiration is the third trait. Hero brands elevate people. They turn aspiration into action by showing customers what is possible beyond their current limitations. Inspiration here isn't an emotional high. It's a strategic tool that expands a customer's sense of their own capability. When a hero brand communicates well, the patron feels something shift. They see themselves as able to do more, become more, pursue more. And that shared sense of striving builds community. Hero brands attract people who crave growth, creating groups unified by what they believe in, not by what they own. The fourth trait is selflessness. Hero brands direct their strength toward the good of others. They don't fight for dominance, they fight for people they serve. Customers sense this and interpret it as integrity. Selflessness increases trust because it signals that the brand's intentions are aligned with the patron's well-being rather than the brand's ego. Internally, it gives teams a sense of purpose beyond performance metrics. Externally, it shows up in how the brand responds to crises, supports communities, and upholds its responsibilities. When customers see a brand consistently act with generosity and resolve, loyalty deepens. The fifth major trait here is momentum. Hero brands create direction. They're unsatisfied with stagnation. They measure success by advancement, not stability. And that orientation attracts people who identify with growth. They give people an arena to push themselves. And that sense of shared movement is magnetic. Now, every archetype has its downsides. So let's be honest about those traps, because the hero archetype has a very specific failure mode, and they tend to be visible until they've already done the damage. First one is over-identification with struggle. This is the most common one, and I think we see it everywhere in the world today. Hero brands can become so attached to the narrative of adversity that they start manufacturing. Every initiative becomes a battle. Every update becomes a victory speech. Every setback becomes a test of character. This constant dramatization exhausts people. Over time, the brand starts to feel heavy rather than uplifting, intense rather than inspiring. Patrons who are already overwhelmed by the world disengage when the brand piles more struggle onto their plate. Internally, it creates cultures where employees feel obligated to operate in crisis mode, even when none exists. And that path leads directly to burnout. The second pitfall is ego-driven posturing. The hero's confidence becomes a liability the moment it slides into ego. Some hero brands begin to believe they are the moral authority of their industry, the gold standard against which everything else should be measured. This alienates customers because it reads as self-congratulatory rather than uplifting. The fatal error is the brand positions itself as a hero of the story instead of a hero of the patron. When that happens, the emotional contract breaks, and internally, ego makes humility impossible. Critique becomes disloyalty, learning becomes threatening, and the brand stops being able to adjust. The third pitfall here is perfectionist intensity. The hero demands excellence, which is appropriate, but that demand can become extreme and start contaminating culture. Teams feel that anything less than flawless execution diminishes the brand. Experimentation gets discouraged, risk-taking gets punished, honest conversations about failure just disappear. And externally, perfectionism kills relatability. Customers don't bond with flawless brands. I'll repeat, customers do not bond with flawless brands. They bond with brands that demonstrate humanity while achieving excellence. When a hero brand refuses to show vulnerability, the audience may admire it, but they don't feel close to it. The fourth one is aggressive tone. The hero's intensity, when uncalibrated, tips into aggression. The language becomes demanding rather than empowering. Customers feel pushed rather than invited. And when a brand insists that only struggle produces meaning, it invalidates other forms of fulfillment and alienates anyone who doesn't identify with relentless intensity. The hero has to learn to calibrate so that the invitation is louder than demand. The final pitfall is misplaced conflict creation. Hero brands sometimes manufacture an enemy simply to maintain narrative tension. When there's no opponent, they create one. And that leads to accidentally villainizing competitors, the category, or even customers who don't share their worldview. The brand stops feeling courageous and starts feeling combative. Internally, it normalizes confrontation over collaboration, and teams become addicted to drama instead of strategy. The hero must fight only when a real battle exists. So let's start to bring this to life. I'm going to use 3 brands that demonstrate the hero archetype, outside looking in, of course. Each one expresses it differently, which is totally the point. This isn't one personality, it's one psychological mechanism with many forms of expression. So the first one we'll look at is Nike, the obvious one. Everyone calls this one out. Nike is the textbook example, and it's worth understanding exactly why. Nike doesn't sell athletic wear. It sells the belief that ordinary people can do something extraordinary. The entire brand is built around Bandura's self-efficacy research. When Nike tells someone to just do it, they're activating a psychological shift. They're increasing the patron's belief in their own ability. And critically, the narrative is never about the brand saving the individual. It's about the individual discovering their own capability. The brand positions itself as the guide, not the protagonist. That's the key. Nike's community programs, running clubs, training initiatives, all of it reinforces the same principle. Capability emerges through effort and support, not shortcuts. The second real-life example would be Microsoft. This one usually surprises people when I bring it up, but it's a clear expression of hero through a completely different context. Microsoft's stated purpose is to empower every person and organization to achieve more. That's not marketing language. It's an explicit commitment to strengthening human capability at global scale. Microsoft doesn't remove the challenge. It equips people to meet the challenge. The hero archetype shows up in accessibility features, educational programs, platform tools designed to elevate user skill and reduce barriers. Microsoft models the hero's role as the guide, providing support, structure, and tools that enable people to rise. The result is a brand identity rooted in strengthening others, which is the defining behavior of the archetype. The third example is from the nonprofit world, and it's Sea Shepherd. Sea Shepherd represents the hero archetype in its most literal and uncompromising form. Where Nike and Microsoft express the archetype through empowerment, Sea Shepherd expresses it through direct confrontation. The organization physically intervenes against threats to marine wildlife. They accept operational and legal risk for the sake of their mission. This is Jung's hero confronting the shadow, moving toward danger, not away from it. And that willingness to sacrifice credibility for something real is exactly what makes them credible. Hero brands gain trust when their actions demonstrate that their commitments are not just symbolic. Sea Shepherd proves that the hero archetype is most powerful when the brand's behavior matches its stated purpose without compromise. So let's wrap this all up. Here's what the hero archetype actually is stripped down. It's not an energy or a vibe. It's not hype. It's not inspirational language or motivational graphics. It's a disciplined approach to helping people become more capable, changing the status quo. The brand identifies a real adversity the patron faces. It demonstrates real capability to help them overcome it. It shows the work. It elevates the patron rather than overshadowing them. And it commits to consistency because the hero archetype collapses the moment it becomes performative. That's the standard. That's what earns the right to call yourself a hero brand. Hopefully it's made a lot of sense. Adopting the hero is a really powerful way to tell a world that's either overborn with overstability or too much control, or the chaos that happens when you're looking for fulfillment and you find yourself alone, or a world that's unfair, or when you have so much belonging that complacency has set in. Hero brands and all of the archetypes within the Change the World quadrant help brands break out, or help people break out of those overbearing situations in a way that guides them towards realizing their own capability, empowering them to win and overcome and grow. That's the magic of a hero brand. The personality traits give it the context and the style, which is why Microsoft and Nike and Sea Shepherd look vastly different. Because archetypes don't guide the personality traits, they guide the psychological driver. And in this case, empowering people to change and to become more, that is the psychological driver and power of hero brands. As always, I would love your opinion on this. I would love some likes, some shares, all the stuff that keeps this going. Hopefully you got a good value out of this episode. And please do join the conversation. Until next time, cheers.